The Russian Special Forces deployment raises the specter of a direct confrontation on the ground between Russian forces and pro-Syrian troops they back on one side, and the Kurdish-led Syrian forces on the other. U.S. Special Forces are also operating with the SDF, providing artillery and other support. Syrian forces have twice come under massive mortar and rocket artillery fire coming from the areas on the eastern bank of the Euphrates where SDF fighters and U.S. Special Forces are deployed, Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor Konashenkov said. Konashenkov said the warning was delivered to the U.S. military command. Russian Special Forces have been deployed to help Syrian government forces fighting the IS militants outside Deir el-Zor, he also said Thursday. Attempts to open fire from SDF-controlled areas would be immediately met with retaliation, he said. The firing positions in those areas will be immediately destroyed with all the arsenal at our disposal. However, a Syrian commander with the SDF denied Russian accusations of shelling, saying at least 7 kilometers, 4 miles, of IS-held territory separates them from the Syrian government troops. The SDF has already accused Russia of targeting its troops in Deir el-Zor in an airstrike last week, a claim Moscow denied. Russia began its operation to support President Bashar Assad's offensive against the IS in Syria in 2015 but has mostly focused on providing air cover to government troops on the ground. The campaign in Deir el-Zor, Syria's oil-rich eastern province, is caught up in a race between government troops and the Syrian Democratic Forces. Both sides are seeking to expand their control of the province bordering Iraq. Many oil fields, including Al Omar, Syria's largest, are scattered on the eastern bank of the Euphrates River. The offensive is focused on the Iraq border area, which is still controlled by IS. Washington fears that further advances by pro-government forces could help Iran, which also has thousands of militiamen fighting alongside the Syrian government, expand its influence across the region via a land bridge spanning through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, all the way to Israel. In the past 2 weeks, the pro-government forces, backed by Russian air cover and Iranian allied militiamen, gained control of most of the city and crossed the Euphrates River to the area of SDF operations. Despite U.S. comments that consultations between the two sides intensified to avoid confrontation on the ground, the trading of accusations has continued. Ahmed Abu Khallah, who commands the SDF unit in Deir el-Zor that is leading the fight in the oil-rich province, told the Associated Press that his troops have not fired at Syrian government forces. He also accused Russia of picking a fight and of seeking to obstruct the advance. Any aggression against his forces will be reciprocated, Abu Khallah said. We are far from them, Daesh is between us, Abu Khallah said in a voice message from Deir el-Zor, using the Arabic acronym for IS. We didn't fire a single bullet toward the regime forces. On Wednesday, Abu Khallah said his troops had redirected their battles away from the river to fight IS militants deeper in the eastern desert. The Syrian forces crossed to the eastern side of the river earlier this week, bringing them just kilometers, miles, away from SDF forces. The Russian-backed offensive on Deir el-Zor began on September 5, when the Syrian forces breached a nearly 3-year-old siege on its troops north of the city. Syrian troops now control roughly 85% of the city and expect to gain full control of it in the coming week, Konashenkov said. The development comes as the battle for the IS stronghold of Raqqa, north of Deir el-Zor, is reaching its final stages, the SDF said Wednesday, nearly 4 months after the offensive began. Less than 300 militants remain holed up in Raqqa, which has witnessed an intense bombing campaign, particularly in the last few days, according to the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights that monitors the war. The campaign to take Raqqa began in June in a quick advance after a breach of the wall of the Old City, a major fortification for the militants. But it has since slowed down as the forces faced mounting resistance from the militants. Associated Press writer Sarah El-Deeb in Beirut contributed to this report.